and welcome back. Today's special guest is novelist Stephen Kelly. Stephen is the author of the Inspector Lamb mystery series published by Pegasus Books. The novels The Language of the Dead, The Wages of Desire, and Hushed in Death are set in the south of England during World War II. Stephen spent 30 years as a newspaper reporter, editor, and columnist, and is now retired. He has a master's degree from the Johns Hopkins University and has taught writing and journalism at Hopkins, Towson University, and Briar College in Virginia. He and his long-life best friend and fellow author, Bryan Denson of The Spy's Son, are in the process of launching an editing and consulting business aimed at helping authors of all skills and experience levels improve their writing in fiction, nonfiction, or journalism. Stephen lives in Columbia, Maryland with his wife, Cindy, son, Ethan, and daughter, Lauren. Please welcome Stephen Kelly. Thank you, Stephen, for accepting my invitation to appear at A Writer's Perspective. It's an honor to have you here today with us. Tell me how, I know that, thank you. I know that you were a journalist. You retired from journalism.
That's right. I was a reporter and editor and other things for 30 plus years. And, the last few years, well, the last 15 years of my tenure, I started in the mid 80s. The business is just collapsing. And, I took a buyout at one point, then I got another job, then I got laid off, then I got another job, then I took some time off, and that's when I wrote my first novel, actually. And then I had to go back again because we needed the money, and
right.
So I did, and then that lasted, excuse me, a couple of years, and then the paper I was working for began to really contract, majorly. And my wife said to me one day, if you want to, you can leave. We'll figure out something else, which is what I did. And then, I don't know, a year later, they just had massive buyouts and layoffs and whatever else. And that everybody I worked with was canned and gone, and there's nobody left. And just about everybody who I came up in the business with is out of it, way out of it.
Wow.
And it's a completely different thing now, totally different.
So now that you mentioned that, it brings me to another point. I don't want to get political because this is not about politics, but in terms of the media today, as a journalist, how do you feel, so it sounds like it's gotten worse.
Oh,
a lot worse.
Well, it's always been left.
Okay.
When I was in it, it was very left, and like I said, I got in the mid 80s, and now it's just spun out of control. I mean, I don't know that there is any more real newspapers left. They all have some sort of agenda and
a twist to it.
A twist. I mean, worse than a twist. I mean, I could look back at 35 years ago and look at even some of the stuff that I wrote, and I was left wing myself in those days. I've changed a little bit. I got a little older, but and I can see the bias in my own stuff, and it wasn't conscious bias in the sense that I sat down and I was like, I'm going to really screw these, Republicans or so. It was just, my worldview was what it was. And so I wrote from that worldview, and, but now it's almost like a war, like the story you write is a weapon that you're going to deploy against your enemy. And it's unbelievable. I'm really, to use a cliche, shocked and saddened by what I see in the media.
Wow.
I mean, so much, so much that's gone on in the last 4 or 5 years. They've completely ignored it, and they've done a huge, massive disservice
Wow.
to this country, and that I love. And
Right.
so yeah, it's and it's not that we were necessarily all that much more, but we weren't. I'm going to say we weren't as conscious of it, and that's not an excuse, but
Right. Yeah, there wasn't a hidden agenda. You reported based on what you felt, you believed in, and what was the truth in your words,
well, there wasn't a hidden agenda in the sense that
Right.
that anybody ever said to me during my career, okay, here's what we're trying to do with this. We're trying to make a certain kind of political point. So you need to really, write it that way. I was always told from the very beginning, try to get as many sources as possible and try to get both sides of the story.
Right.
And I did all that, and so did everybody else I worked with. But the fact of the matter is that, the starting point, the place from where we were starting to begin with was on the left. So we were interested in certain things. Excuse me, I just dropped something.
That's okay.
And not interested in other things. And so those things that we were interested in, we wrote about. Those things that we weren't interested in, we tended to ignore. So, and I think that's been the case for a long time. I mean, I was born in 1957, and I remember, I grew up watching Walter Cronkite and those guys, and even then,
Yeah.
there was a certain bias to it.
So. Wow. Yeah, that's really sad because since the Trump administration and the whole thing about fake news, it just changed the mentality of the Americans, of us.
Well, I think you did have a lot of fake news being reported.
Right.
A lot of fake news being, there's almost like a conduit from the deep state to the media now, and they feed us the fake news. So
is there anything out there for people to watch that's relatively true news versus fake news? In your opinion, since you were...
Well, in my opinion, yeah, there's some. I call it the samizdat. I think that's the way you pronounce the word. During the Soviet, the height of the Soviet Russia, before the fall of the wall, there was what they called a samizdat press. I think that's how you say the word.
Okay.
And it's basically the underground press. It's the press outside the government control.
Oh, wow.
And I think there's a samizdat press in the United States now, and I personally see a lot of truth in it, but it's also coming from a certain wing of the politics. Right. So I don't know that there is anything. And maybe there never has been. Maybe there never has been a real honest, straight down the middle journalism. It's never existed.
Yeah, that's scary. That's too bad. That's it's really sad because we do, the private citizens, the ones that are not involved, depend on hearing and hopefully, hearing the truth as it is, right? And not doctored or hidden agendas and stuff like that. So
yeah,
terrible.
Well, we could talk about. I mean, I could talk about that all day, but
right.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on. That's really very,
that's too bad.
It makes me really sad. I feel kind of hollowed out by it all. It's like, it's unbelievable.
Especially since it was your career.
What's that?
Especially since it was your career and it was something you believed in at the time,
Well, it was. I was glad to get out of it when I did. I was perfectly happy and willing to cut ties. And, I'm a little bit more poor.
Right.
Not necessarily in spirit or in family or anything, but I'm not making anywhere near the kind of money I was making when I was working full time as a journalist.
Right. So now you're retired, and you made the cross into writing, novelist, correct? So that's what you're doing pretty much.
Well, yeah. When I first left my last newspaper job, excuse me, the plan was for me to, because I had a book contract then, and I had to finish a book, and I had a kind of a deadline, kind of a floating deadline. But so the first thing I did was I finished that book and I turned it in, and it was and here I'll do a little plug. It was my third novel in the Inspector Lamb series. It was Hushed in Death. And I had written 2 novels before that, and this was the third. And so I had a pretty strict they put kind of a deadline on me. They like you to get 1 book out a year when you have a series. And so I did that, and I also kind of lucked into getting a side gig working for the Howard County, Maryland government on they had a plan for Ellicott City. I don't know if you know.
I know Ellicott City.
May not, but you know, Ellicott City had flooded twice in the previous 4 or 5 years. It was national news. It was really bad flooding.
It was.
And Ellicott City has been flooding since it was built in the 18th century. And so they were coming up with kind of a plan to rebuild parts of Ellicott City. And they hired me to kind of help them write the plan out so that it would be so that the average person could pick it up and understand.
Layman's terms, yeah.
Yeah, right. Layman's terms, exactly. And I did that for a while. I was making a little money doing that. And then the guy who hired me actually lost the election.
Of
2018. So I was out.
Out again.
So, yeah. So so since then I've been mostly writing full time. And I've got something going on, and I can tell you about this later if you're interested. With one of my best friend from all of my life. We met when we were 14, when we both came out from the cross country team at Mount Hebron High School in Ellicott City. And we both were runners and both wanted to write books, and neither one of us published a book until we were in our mid 50s. We were both journalists, and weirdly enough, my book came out in April of 2015, my first book, and his came out in May of 2015.
Wow.
And we were both, you know, in our 50s, and we remained lifelong best friends. And we're going to try to put together something over the next 6 or 7 months that we call the Righteous Brothers. Righteous Brothers. We're going to call it the Wright Brothers, but that's been taken. So now we're the Righteous Brothers, and we're going to try to create a kind of online community for writers and you know, some workshops and
awesome
things like that, and maybe bring some other writers in, and just try to create a kind of community for writers, and you know, so we'll see where that goes. But
let me know because I would like to promote that.
Yeah, no, that's I would love, you know, and I appreciate this because
yes,
you know, and you know, if you would like, I mean, we can certainly. Brian and his name is Bryan Denson. His book is called The Spy Son.
I know. I'm gonna study him a little bit more and read the book. I bought the book. So I need to read it. And I like being prepared, you know.
No, absolutely. And you know, the hook is that, you know, we've literally known each other since we were 14. We're 64 now.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we remained friends all that time, best friends. I mean, I've never lost contact with him. He's never lost contact with me. And now we're, you know, he's also a retired newspaper guy.
Yeah.
He took a completely different, you know, path than I did. But, you know, we both sort of ended up kind of in their mid 50s, finally publishing a book after wanting to have done so since the age of 14. Basically.
Yeah.
And now I think we're going to try to use that combined.
Right. I think it's awesome. It's fantastic. And I love the name, The Righteous Brothers. I think, you know, and I was talking to Lonnie Lynn yesterday, and the themes in her books is about fate. And the Wright brothers may have been taken, but I think The Righteous Brothers is fantastic. It's awesome.
You can come up with a lot of musical puns with that.
Yeah, you'll get.
We'll make your copy sing, you know, whatever. Put you back in harmony with your manuscript.
Right, right. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh, you
Yeah.
guys are terrible. I can see that happening.
Yeah.
So, are you still teaching at Johns Hopkins
No, I haven't taught at Hopkins
in a
for,
while?
well, since 99, since I graduated from the writing seminars.
How about Towson University or Briar? You still?
Well, I actually taught at Towson before I went to Hopkins, and I was, a working journalist at the time, and
Okay.
I taught one class in news writing, and the paper that I worked for gave me time off to go, and I was an
Fantastic.
8:30 a.m. class, so I went over there at 8:30 a.m. and
Wow.
taught the class, and then came to work. But that was just for one semester, and
Right.
then I went to the writing seminar. It's kind of a mid-career thing for me, and because I had written a manuscript, I'd written a book, a memoir about my father,
Oh, wow.
and I wanted to try to get it published, and I had shown it to a couple of agents, and there had been a little bit of interest, and one agent actually said she was very interested, and then her boss read the manuscript and said no. And she sent me the note that this guy wrote. It was like very sobering. But anyhow, that's the way it is.
So, have you thought about self-publishing?
Well, no, I never did, publish that as a book. But that was one of the reasons I went to Hopkins, is I was trying to basically make some connections
Mm-hmm.
in the publishing world, and it was only a 2-semester thing. So, I took basically a leave of absence from work, and then went back to work again after that. And it was not too long after that because I was kind of freelancing and doing some other things before I ended up back into a full-time job. I was doing a kind of transitional thing. I wasn't able to just hop back from Hopkins into the
Right, right.
work world. I had to, and I was freelancing and doing some stuff, and I was teaching and doing some freelance writing, and I have some friends at Briar who are novelists, John Gregory Brown and Carrie Brown. I don't know if you know them.
So, Carrie Brown sounds familiar. So does John Gregory.
John Gregory and Carrie, yeah, and they both worked at the same newspaper that I worked at
Oh, wow.
one point, and then John published a novel. This was back in the early '90s, and he got a job at Briar. Basically, he's the head of their writing program, and so they've both been down there for years, 30 years, I guess. It's close to 30 years now. And but this was 1999, so it was 23, 24 years ago.
Mhm.
And they had a thing where they had a school newspaper, and the thing had gone moribund, and they wanted to hire somebody to kind of revive it. And they were like, well, maybe we'll maybe we'll get Steve to do that. And they, so I did. So I went down there, and I spent a semester down there, reviving their newspaper with a bunch of journalism students, English students, writer types, really good group of young people. And we kind of revived the newspaper. I don't know what happened to it after that, but and so that, that's why I was at Briar, teaching at Briar. And that's really the last time I've done any academic stuff, because then very soon after that, I got married and started having children, and I needed to, go back to work.
Right.
Which is what I did. And
Right.
and then, one thing followed another, and that what I just told you at the beginning, with the the buyouts and the layoffs, and
Yeah.
that all happened. But that happened all over the business. It was
Right,
all over
right.
the business that happened. It was, and lots of people, like I said, that I grew up with in the business. In fact, I would say all of them
Wow.
are out of it. They're gone. They're
Wow.
doing something else, or they're retired or whatever. And some of them have been gone for 15 years. I mean, they've been gone a long time. So
That's crazy.
yeah.
So that was going to be my.
It's the way it is. I mean,
Yes, I know. It is what it is, unfortunately. So my next question was going to be, how did you balance your writing life with the family? But that pretty much, you just pretty much answered that, kind of.
well, you know, I'm a firm believer in writing every day. I think that's if there's a key or a secret, that's it.
Right, right.
It's just consistency and sticking with it and never, even if you sit in front of your computer and don't do anything for 3 hours.
I think we've all been there.
Well, so you got to come back the next day and hope that, and then you come back the next day and the next day. And, if you need to, you step away from the computer and pick up a pen and a piece of paper and start scribbling on that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so that's what I did is I have for years, I get up really early in the morning and I start work very early in the morning. And when my kids were younger, they're 16 and 19 now, but when they were younger, because my wife's a teacher and she leaves the house at 7 a.m. So everybody gets up early, and so at one point I was, my kids were sleeping until 8:30 because, they were little kids. And so I'd write during that time and then I'd get them up at a certain time and, take them to preschool or whatever. And then after a while, they both were in elementary school and the bus would come at 9 o'clock. So, I'd get up at 6 o'clock and write for a couple of hours, get them up, get them their breakfast, get them ready for school, walk them up to the bus stop, put them on the bus at 9 o'clock, and then I'd just go to work. And that's how I did it. And, a lot of people do that, I think.
Yeah.
Some people do it at night, And, and then once I took that first buyout, I had some time and I was able to write, 4 or 5 hours a day. Again, I would get my kids up, get them off to school, go back and start to write. Then I'd have to go at 3 o'clock. They'd get off the bus, and then I'd be back to being a dad. But and then I was laid off in 2011, something like that. I can't remember. And I took unemployment. Which I didn't want to do, but
right.
And, wrote for a year, and that's when I wrote the bulk of my first published novel, which is The Language of the Dead. Yeah, you got it. There you go. And I happen to have one right here.
You gave me this.
I know. I remember that.
You signed it for me. It was during the Catherine of Sarros farewell.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember sitting there next to you, and I read the back of it, and I'm used to reading romance novels all my life. As a kid, I started out with Barbara Cartland, Victoria Holt, Phyllis Whitney, and then some Harlequins, which were nice and clean back then.
Yeah.
And so I read the back. I remember sitting next to you. I think you brought another copy and you gave it away at a raffle.
I was just given, yeah. I mean, I bought a couple of copies, and they had a raffle, and they wanted you to, submit a book for that, and so I did.
And so the reason why I'm excited was because I'm remembering I was sitting there next to you, and I read it, and I was like, darn, I'm gonna have to get that book. And because, again, I'm used to reading the romance, and doing a writer's perspective has taught me a lot, has made me grow as a reader. And so I remember reading it. I love detective stories. I love mysteries. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to get a copy of this. And then you had one left, and we were talking. We started to talk a little bit, and then you're like, okay, here, you want this one? And I was like, yes. Yes. And so it took me a little bit before I actually sat down, had the time to read it. And can I tell you, I was hooked from page one.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's that's important that you get faithful.
I mean, I just kept saying one more page. You know how you have to get up and do things, and I'm like, no, one more page, and like not even halfway through the book, I realized Ken Follett reminded me of The Key to the Rebecca. Ken Follett. I mean, it's not about spies.
Yeah.
But the era, the period.
Yeah, no, he definitely wrote a couple. In fact, you know, I love The Eye of the Needle. I love the book, the book and the movie both. And you know, I mean, I read once somewhere where Ken Follett said he or is it Follett? I never did know how to pronounce his name. It's like Samizdat. I read these things, but I don't look up how to pronounce.
That's okay.
No, I'm kidding. But yeah, he said something about like he wrote the first draft of Eye of the Needle in like 6 weeks or something, and because it was you know, I guess he was channeling the, you know, the deepest recesses or something, and he said I knew I had a good book, and he said I figured now I can start paying my mortgage. You know, words to that effect. And then of course the thing became a massive bestseller, and they turned it into a movie, and you know, but he kind of it was one of those things where, you know, I've heard other writers talk about this or read them, where, you know, there's a book in your life that just like pours out of you, and it's usually going to be good.
Yeah.
If that's the case. Not that you don't have to refine it, but you know, there's probably, everybody probably has one in them that they want to write or they think they should write, and it's not necessarily easy to get to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
No, I thought it was phenomenal.
Thank you.
I was literally transported with the way you wrote it, the words, you know, the prose, the narrative, the description, the world building. I was literally, I mean, I could see myself standing out there in the fields and hearing the siren go off.
Yeah.
And the fear. I felt the fear of the bombing. You know, the threats of the German bombers. And and then when you go back to his home, you know, when he gets up in the morning and they have their ration of, you know, bread and cheese and whatever, it was like, wow, I don't know why, but and again, I think it's just the way you write. I felt myself standing there watching them, you know, have their cup of tea with their piece of bread and it's like, you have this compassion for what these people went through during, you know, the London Blitz, or whatever, you know, when England was being bombed.
Yeah, it was actually called the Battle of Britain, and people sometimes mix it up with the Blitz.
The London Blitz.
Yeah, right. The Blitz was later, and the Battle of Britain was really more of the Germans trying to strategically bomb Britain into submission so that they could then come across the channel from France and invade.
Wow.
And you know, and that's, I don't know if you remember the old Churchill speech about never has had so many owed so much to so few.
Right.
He was talking about the RAF pilots, you know,
wow,
who defended Britain during that, because, you know, they were the only defense, you know, those pilots that went up and did battle in the skies with the Germans, and you know, and they won that battle, and the Germans backed down, and that was it. They, you know, there was never an invasion of Britain, but they did come back later and start basically terror bombing cities like London. It was just to terrorize the
people.
You know, occasionally they'd knock out an airplane factory or something, but you know, most of it was just terrorizing the population, the urban population of Britain.
Right. So one question I have: what's the problem with Wallace? Well, and I'm going to get book 2 and 3. So
Okay.
maybe you've developed Wallace later on. I don't know.
Wallace gets developed, and so does Lamb's daughter,
Okay, yeah, Vera.
Vera.
Hmm.
And in fact, Wallace and Vera kind of end up
Okay,
romantically entwined.
okay,
Um, by book 3, they're basically,
getting married or
well, not getting married, but because Vera, one of the things I wanted to try to do was to,
modernize her.
well, I wanted to try to appeal to female readers.
Right, right,
That's one thing. I mean, I'll be honest about it. I mean, most people who read novels are women, not, and and it's about the war, and it has a male lead, and but I felt like there were certain aspects about what happened in the Second World War with women, that were very revolutionary in a way, and the war kind of pushed it all forward. And so I think, for example, conscription. Britain instituted female conscription. That was the first time they ever conscripted women in the history of the country. But they, got to the point where they conscripted young women into war service. Now, they didn't send them into combat, but they sent them into various domestic jobs.
right, right,
Farming and things like that. All the men went away to fight, and there was nobody to raise the wheat.
right, right,
So they conscripted women into doing this, and
right,
factories and things like that. And a lot of women, were able to experience something that they never would have experienced, and a kind of. So Vera, I have her. She's young. She's just getting out of high school. Basically, she's on the verge of her womanhood. I mean, and so she has dreams and desires, and the war is, on the one hand, blocking those and getting them in the. But on the other hand, it's opening up opportunities for her too.
right. Yeah, I thought it was that's interesting because I was wondering what got her to that position where she rang the alarm. She has a post that she watches over, and she rings the alarm, the siren, if
Right.
there are German, planes going around.
Yes.
So that's is why, because they constricted the women, right?
Well, so what happened was actually that was part of it, but conscription came just a little bit later after that. Believe it or not, after that, and not that that makes any difference.
Oh, yeah, it's world building, yeah.
To the novel, because it really doesn't. I mean, those
Right.
kinds of like details, or nobody knows when. There might be a few people who could tell you the date upon which female conscription began in Britain during World War. I can't remember what the date was, but I think it was 1941, middle of 1941, something like that. But so so that was speaking as a writer, as a novelist, whatever. I had to figure out a way to get her into the story, and put her in the same place that the action was happening. And because one of the original drafts I wrote, I had her working in an airplane factory in Southampton, which is the big port city down there. And in fact, one of the main targets of the Germans was what was known as the Supermarine Factory, which the Supermarine Company was the company that produced the Spitfire, the fighter plane that was the kind of iconic plane of the Battle of Britain, the British fighter. And so they were constantly trying to take out the Supermarine Factory and stop the production of Spitfires.
Wow.
And so I had her, working in that factory, because, and I realized, once I had written a couple of drafts of the book, that it was too far away from what was really going on. And I had to, Lamb had to keep going in a car and going over to, I was like, no, this isn't working. So I had to get her into the village where the murder had taken place. And one of the things that I, found out in my research was that in the very beginning, the British had basically a civil defense organization And just about every little teeny tiny town and village and hamlet had a civil defense person whose job
Wow.
it was to ring the alarm if the planes came.
Wow.
Uh, and so I thought, well, that's a good job. She could do that.
Yeah.
And she, often they were women because the men were going off to, elsewhere to fight. So, and that was particularly true of the Battle of Britain, the summer of 1940, when the Germans were coming over every day and bombing southern England. And so you needed somebody, and at that level, that teeny tiny level, you needed somebody to alert the local
I thought it was
populace.
awesome. Yeah, I thought it was a great job for her.
Yeah, so I thought, well, she could do that, and then that put her in the action, and it also allowed me to, because the other thing about her working in Southampton and everything was she didn't really have any relationships with anybody that made any difference in the book, except for her father.
Right.
So that allowed me for her to begin to have a relationship with Wallace, of such as it was, and that ripens over the next couple of books.
Okay.
And it also allowed me for her to have a kind of relationship with the boy who was originally the prime suspect.
Right.
So, because he's trying to communicate through her,
Right. Through the painting, through his drawings.
through his drawings, yeah. And
Yeah.
so that turned out to be much better because she was right in the middle of the action. I didn't have to keep pulling my main character away to go to Southampton to have a scene with his daughter that didn't really, when you get right down to it, didn't make any sense in terms of the book.
Yeah.
So that's why I did it that way.
Yeah. No, it was fantastic. And the other thing that was really, for me, was I was happy about, I couldn't guess until almost the end, or until you reveal who the killer is.
Yeah.
So I find I'm one of those, halfway through the book, I'm like, I know who did it, And so in this one, I thought, okay, he did it. And then no, because that person gets killed. So I was like, darn, and then all the way into the end. And when I realized, when it's revealed who did it, I was like, oh, I never suspected him, to being the person, and why, these people were killed, what he was doing, to these boys, Right. So anyway, I don't want to give too much in case we have readers listening, reading, watching the video.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate you saying that, because, that's part of what you're trying to do when you write a mystery is, I feel like, mysteries should be fun to read. The reader should feel like they're involved in the solving of the thing, and that's why there are certain rules you have to, I think they're iron rules that you have to abide by.
Right.
And, for example, you can't just like throw some character in at the end of the book and say, you've never met this person, you've never seen him,
and he's the killer.
and he's the killer, right? Yeah, and you can't do that. That's not so. That's the tightrope you walk as the author, but hopefully, the reader is walking along with you, and they're kind of like, well, maybe it is this person, and then no, maybe not, and so I appreciate you saying that. I'm glad that you did that.
Yeah, and you throw a couple of monkey wrenches in there, because you mentioned witchcraft. The Will Black, I think it's Will, the older,
Will Black,
that is considered a witch, and so now you're thinking, as when I'm reading it in the beginning, I'm thinking, oh wow, maybe there's the demonic spirits and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it's a historical fiction, there's nothing paranormal about it, but then you wonder. So it had a lot of instances where you had the reader thinking like, oh, wait, which is great,
Yeah. And I stole the main idea from an actual murder that happened in Warwickshire.
Oh, really?
I hope that's the right pronunciation.
Yeah, Warwickshire, yeah.
In 1944, in February 1944, there was an old farmer named Charles Walton who was found killed on the hill above this little village.
Wow.
And he had a scythe in his neck and a pitchfork through his heart. And somebody had inscribed a crucifix into his forehead. this was an actual case,
Right.
and they brought in the top Scotland Yard guy at the time,
Wow.
Robert something. I can't remember his name now, but because my memory is like going. The older I get, the more I like.
Oh, trust me, I had some last night. Senility.
Yeah, Robert Fabian. And Robert Fabian became during the 50s, was very famous in Britain in fact, they even had a television, drama called Fabian of the Yard. Robert Fabian wrote his memoirs, and one of the things he worked on was Charles Walton's murder. He was never able to solve it. And to this day, it remains unsolved, and it's still one of the great unsolved murders in Britain. And there's a kind of folk stuff that's built up around Charles Walton, because there were people who believed that he was killed because he was a witch and because he had cast spells on the crops and things like that.
Oh.
But but Fabian, and there was a local detective too who played a big role in this, felt that was all a cock up. That was, and that they suspected one of the local farmers who owed Walton money of killing him, and then
making it look like
he had been killed, because there were a lot of stories about this guy as he grew up. So everybody in the village knew about Charles Walton, and they knew that there were these stories about him having seen a black dog at one point in his life, and that in the mythology, that's Satan appearing to you, the black dog and all this kind of stuff. And so the killer used that as a ruse, and apparently it worked, because they've never solved the case.
Wow.
So I borrowed that case.
Yeah.
And Will Blackwell is kind of based on Charles Walton, in that he's a very simple, straightforward farmer who doesn't bother anybody, keeps to himself, and people think he's weird, he's a little weird. And so all this kind of spins out of control, and in that way. And so I kind of I have to admit that I borrowed that for that, because I thought that was exactly the kind of thing that you wanted a murder mystery,
Yeah, but that's
questions about motivation and everything.
Yeah, but that is all that's what writing is about. It's taking these ideas, that's how we come up with all these ideas.
Yeah. Right.
Bob Mayer says it, and so does Stephen King.
Does he say that? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, he wrote Christine, the one about the car.
Yeah.
And he got the idea from a news story about a car that went off, by itself. It took off accidentally, and killed somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something like that he was saying, and that's how he got the idea for the movie, the book Christine.
Yeah.
So we listen. Tracy Garner, she hears stuff in the news, and she bases a lot of her stories on what she hears. So there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I just like to tell people that
Yeah.
Mea culpa. I didn't come up with that. I changed it and put it in 1940 as opposed to 1944. And I put it in Hampshire as opposed to. But there was some elements to that I just thought were so
interesting. Yeah, it was
perfect for a novel.
No, it was. It was very good.
Yeah.
Good. You picture him. I pictured him there lying on top of the hill, and going up to find the body and all the stuff that happened to him. So it's very vivid.
Well, there's still an online presence. This murder, people go to trying to think of the name of the village. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but the hill is called Meon Hill, Meon, Meon Hill. It's this hill above this little village, and he was found on Meon Hill. He had been trimming hedges and with a scythe, with a
the little curve,
a bull whack or something like that, or something. I can't remember what the word is. A bull hook or something, and that was one of the things that his killer killed him with. He also had a pitchfork, and there was a lot of speculation about how this was really overdone. I mean, you put the bull hook in the guy's neck. You don't really need to put the pitchfork in his. But that was the whole thing about the witchcraft, is that one of the local legends was that if you kill a witch, you have to pin it to the ground so that its spirit can't rise again, and also the blood that drips from the body into the ground renourishes the soil that the witch has poisoned.
Right. Wow.
There's all this kind of 15th century stuff and everything, but the people of the time, a lot of them knew that, and they knew those old stories, and
that's interesting.
They didn't necessarily believe them, but they knew them, and so so that there was that mythology that of the place was part of it too, and I thought that was really interesting. If this guy had been killed in the middle of Manhattan and somebody tried to pretend that it was witchcraft, nobody would have bought it, right? But up there in the middle of,
the hill in the country,
right,
and the folklore and the superstitions.
It's not ignorance; it's the culture. It's the folklore.
Yeah. So, do you consider yourself a history enthusiast?
Yeah, I'm definitely a history enthusiast and have always been a history enthusiast. Yeah.
Are you focused on in the 40s, or do you do other kinds of?
When I was younger, I was interested in war. I was a boy, and I was interested in the Civil War, and I was interested in World War II. My father was in World War II. He was wounded in France.
Oh, wow.
He never talked about it much.
Right.
But, I was born in 1957. I came of age in the mid-1960s. I was a little kid in the mid-1960s.
Mm-hmm.
And, that decade was a decade in which the war started to become really more mythologized. There was a lot of movies in the 60s about the war. World War II, Hollywood type blockbusters, which to this day I think are still worth watching, like The Longest Day and The Great Escape and Von Ryan's Express.
Have you? That one is sad. Have you ever watched Where Eagles Dare?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
I mean, and so, and every friend I had in those days, and when I was a young kid, either had a father or a grandfather that had served in some way, shape, or form. I mean, just talking about my best friend Brian, and his father was on an aircraft carrier that was hit by a kamikaze, and he was blown into the water, and he survived that, but it was a traumatic experience for him. He was only 15, 16 years old at the time. He had lied about his age to get into the Navy, and toward the end of the war, he was on this ship, and the ship was hit by a kamikaze, and the thing exploded and knocked him right into the sea, and he almost died. And so but that's what I grew up with. I mean, most of the men in my neighborhood, the dads, had some sort of service.
Yes.
Here. One of the guys who, the people who were our next door neighbors when I was growing up, he was a bomber pilot.
Wow.
B-25s. My wife's grandfather was a navigator on a B-25, and in the Pacific.
My dad was in the Korean War.
Yeah, well, I mean, very, very, right after that, and. So I was interested in that. I was interested in the Civil War. We used to go up to Gettysburg all the time when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I just read a lot of, the kind of books that you read as a kid, and then, I was a kind of social sciences major in college, because I wasn't any good at math.
Me too.
I took all those BS courses, My wife took all the real courses, like,
Wow.
the math and the chemistry and all that. I took all the crap. But anyhow, some of it was good because it was history, real history. And so when I started writing this, I mentioned this memoir about my father. I kind of went back to studying the Second World War. And I realized that, I didn't really know that much about it when you get right down to it. I knew these concepts and things, but I didn't know the narrative. I didn't really know. I mean, I knew about, Hiroshima, and I knew about D-Day, and I knew about, whatever, but I couldn't tell you necessarily which came before the other,
Right, right.
So, then I got back into it in a big way, and kind of educated myself on the war. And so now I'm very interested in the war. I know a lot about the war. I know a lot about
Right.
the First World War, the Second World War, and the Civil War. Those are my wars.
Right.
And I don't really know too much about the Boer War or whatever. But and so when I say history, that's basically, and the history of the United States and mostly the 20th century, but also part of the the 19th century. And I feel like I should learn more about the beginning of the country than I do.
Yeah.
I only have the basic knowledge, but so.
Have you considered writing something about the Civil War?
I considered at one point writing a novel that would set just after the Civil War, and this guy was coming back. He was anyhow, he was going to end up back in Antietam in Sharpsburg, and he would have fought at Antietam, but this would be after the war, and he was having psychological problems, and he begins to maybe think that he's seeing ghosts and things like that. And I did try to start that and write that, and it turned into something completely different.
Did it?
Yeah, and it's now a 9,000 word short story that I have no idea where I'm ever going to, if I'm ever going to get it published anywhere, where I'd even publish it or try to get it published. So I did think about that, and years ago, I also plotted out something where I was going to try to set a novel in Boston just before the revolution. Kind of like in the Paul Revere time.
Yeah.
Just before all hell broke loose, kind of.
Right.
And I plotted it out. Well, I sat down one day years ago and kind of wrote out a plot, but never did anything with it. So.
Okay. So what's next for Lamb? Because you got 3 books, right?
Well, Lamb, unfortunately, has gone the way of the buffalo because my publisher was not happy with the sales of the 3rd book.
That's too bad.
And they basically, fired me. That was it. And I had written a 4th novel, but they rejected it. And I'm not sure that anybody there even read it. I don't really know, but so Lamb is kind of done for the moment. I kind of wonder whether or not I should self-publish some of this stuff. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've made up my mind yet.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I've written some other things. I did go back and finish up that memoir, and I'm going to try to get that published. It's about my dad, who was a professional hockey player, and
wow,
he made it all the way to the very top of the game. He was the starting goalie for the New York Rangers in 1941, 42.
What?
Yeah, he was.
Wow.
And but he had a nervous breakdown and left training camp. And
was it due to the war?
Well, then after that, he was conscripted into the United States Army. He was Canadian. In the meantime, he had married my mother, who was a Baltimore girl. He had met her, and we came here to play. He came to Baltimore to play hockey. Played for the Baltimore Orioles, which was the name of the hockey team at the time. This was the late 30s. And he eventually, was chosen to start in goal for the New York Rangers. And he had this nervous breakdown in training camp, and kind of left training camp, and he was never really able to go back. And although he did go back and play one more year of hockey in Kansas City, it was like a AAA team there. And the guy who owned his contract, Lester Patrick, who was the general manager of the Rangers, basically lent him out to Kansas City so he could keep playing for at least a year, but he didn't want him playing in the NHL because he didn't want my dad playing goal against the Rangers.
Right.
One time my dad almost went up to the Chicago Blackhawks, but that was also nixed because Patrick didn't want him playing for the Blackhawks. He still considered him New York Ranger material.
Yeah.
But my father had this problem, and this caused consternation and whatever, which it should have, I guess. I mean, he walked away from training camp.
Wow.
But then he was conscripted into the army, and he was sent to France, and he landed in Normandy with his division in late July. So this was way after D-Day.
Wow.
But by then the Americans and the British were sort of pushing the Germans, finally pushing them out of Normandy and pushing them south, and then trying to turn them toward the Seine and Paris. And my father got caught up in all that, and he was wounded in action and sent home. And that was the end of his hockey career. He was hit by shrapnel in his arm, and it tore up his right arm really badly, and he was never really able to use his right hand again, other than just for the most basic stuff. He had to teach himself how to do everything left-handed after that. But that was the end of his hockey career, and he never went back to the sport, and I think it haunted him for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the memoir is about.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you should definitely finish it, and if you have to self-publish it.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to try to get it published. The other hook is I went to Normandy in 1994 on the 50th anniversary of the battle, because I thought, all right, this is the 50th anniversary of the battle. The 50 means something. It's a big deal. This is going to be the last hurrah for all these guys, right? They're not going to, this is going to be it. My father did not go. He was too ill to go, but I went on my own, and I went and found the place where he was wounded, and met a lot of these guys. These are the men who I grew up with, right? These were the dads and the granddads. They're great guys. Every one of them. I loved every one of them. And they would tell me, I'd finish talking to them, and they'd say, tell your dad I said hello. Tell your dad I said hello. There was a kinship and a comradeship there.
Yeah.
And they had all seen all these terrible things, and yet they lived very good lives, afterwards. And here they were back for the 50th anniversary, and no bragging, no whatever. They just wanted to be there and see it. They have one last hurrah.
Right. Right.
So the book was partly about that too, about me going back to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really sounds good. Do you keep in touch with any writing organizations? Do you keep in touch? Do you form any groups with other authors, novelists?
No. My buddy Brian, again, he's a full-time writer, and I didn't actually send him any of these Lamb novels.
Oh, really?
No, I never did. And but I'll send him what I write now and have him take a look at it. And I didn't read his book either, and until it was between covers. But no, I don't really. I'm not involved in any kind of. I was always. I basically was working in the newspaper business, and
right.
And raising kids, and
right.
So I had kind of enough on my plate, and I was just hoping for the best. I was just doing what I could do in the time given to me, and hoping for the best, basically, is what I was doing. And people sometimes ask me, what's the secret? And I said, there is no secret. You have to sit down and start writing. That's basically
exactly.
do it.
Exactly.
And then you have to go back the next day and the next day and the day after that and the day after that. And you have to keep doing it until you get to a point where you feel like you have something.
Right.
And that's all there is to it.
Yeah. Have you been contacted by other readers, by readers?
Oh yeah, I get emails from readers. I used to get them fairly regularly because I had a thing on my website where if you got on my author website, there was a thing, you can shoot me an email, and I used to get a fair number. I don't get many anymore. I just got one about a week ago though, which somebody said, "Yeah, I like the books," and I still haven't quite answered it yet because
Right.
Well, guess what? They
Yeah.
fired me.
Right.
I don't. I'm yesterday's news. Or Lamb is yesterday's news.
I don't. I mean, I don't agree with you. I don't think Lamb is. I mean, it's
in
kinda,
terms of the
story. You
publishing
mean?
world and whether or not it's going to make any money for anybody, and I had to move. I don't mean to sound bitter about it. I'm not bitter in the least bit, really. I don't. It is what it is, and things happen to people.
No, it's the nature of the business.
It's the nature of life. Things happen to you, and you got to keep rolling.
Yeah, life gets in the way.
I had my little time there, and then that ended, and now I've had to recalibrate.
Right.
What I do, and that's taken me a couple of years to kind of get back to something that is my own, if for lack of a better way of putting it, and that also is potentially publishable and saleable. I didn't want to just to use the cliche, reinvent the wheel, because it wasn't, it didn't sell.
Right.
It didn't sell. So I wanted to try something different. And it was kind of a blessing in disguise in some ways because, I'm glad I'm not still cranking out Lamb novels all the time. And
Right.
it gave me a chance to do something else.
Right.
The problem is it doesn't bring in much income. And that's
well, I mean, I think like
a bugaboo for writers. Is
right.
Where's the money going to come from?
Yeah, I think you're a gifted writer. You're very talented. And I think, my sadness is I hope it doesn't end with the Lamb series. I hope that you continue to produce. I was telling my other author yesterday that the business is really sad because I'm discovering that the people that I meet in this business, especially, whether they're self-published, traditional published, indie published, they're so damn gifted, so damn talented. And it's really sad that they're not getting the readership that they should be getting, the accolades that they should be getting, because it's amazing, the quality of stories and how well written they are, and they pull you in, and you walk away. You grow as a reader. This is the thing I was telling her yesterday, that there is a difference, because I brought up the novels of the 70s, the romance stories or fiction stories of the 70s and 80s. And back then, everybody used to joke and call them trashy novels because it was all about, sex, lying, cheating, killing, raping, and people were into these novels like crazy, and so the Sidney Sheldons of the world and Jackie Collins and Jude Devereaux, they made money because this is what people at the time wanted. Well, now I'm seeing now, and I've been seeing it for a while, that there's more to these stories. There's character, there's honesty, whether it's about a poor family or a rich family. There's real struggles. It's not anymore about the sex, even though a lot of women do want to read the sex novels, with sex in it. But I'm seeing more of the quality of writing, the magic. I mean, for me, when I read Language of the Dead, to say I was really transposed into this countryside, and I could see the green and yellow grass, and I can hear the alarm going off. I mean, that's never happened to me in anything that I've read.
Oh, well,
No, never, never. Now, with the stuff that I've read recently, and the ladies and other authors that I've interviewed, fantastic stories. Their stories touched me more in an emotional capacity, as a person who's compassion.
Mhm.
The language of the dead did touch me in a compassion way, because I kind of, again, like I said, I was there watching lamb eating, and the rations, and the way you mentioned, that stuff. I felt the compassion, but I was transposed. I was there, I mean, I literally saw myself standing there going, wow, is that what they're eating? Oh my God. And then when, Vera's, goes the alarm, and I think Marjorie is riding the bike, I'm like, wow, I'm like standing there. It was weird. I mean, I thought I was in a virtual reality. I was just like standing there and watching her go by, and then hearing the alarm and the fear, I
Well,
was
thank you very much.
so
I'm,
please, keep writing, even if
Well,
it's not lamb,
yeah. I mean, I'll always write, and I know that, part of what you're trying to do here is to, talk to people who actually write and find out, what they know or whatever. And I would, tell your audience that, for myself and for most people who I know who write and are serious writers and serious about writing, it's like you couldn't not do it. It's almost like you have to.
You have to. It's your passion.
And that can be that's a good thing and a bad thing sometimes. And it can be a little wearing sometimes, to feel like you gotta, you have to keep putting that next book out and that next book out. And but it is what it is, and I actually love it. I mean, I'm glad to be able to do it, and I feel like, my wife is really allowing me to do this. I mean, she's the one who's bringing the bacon home right now, not me.
Right.
So her generosity, in seeing, that maybe I have something to offer by writing every day.
Right.
Because I don't want it just to be, what Steve want to do, and well, he wants to write. Okay, well, everybody else will go work while he stays home and write. That's not what I want to have happen. So it is important for me to try to have an end game, and hopefully get something published, and hopefully get a contract and some money for it. I'm not doing it just for the money, but I don't want to do it I don't want to have the attitude of, this just makes me feel good, and so I'm gonna do that. And I don't think any really serious, successful writer doesn't, has just that. I just want to be creative and create this. No, it's like I want to get it published and get paid for it.
Right.
It's part of why I'm doing it, and and there's a reason that has to do not just with me, but but the people in my family, my wife and kids, and that's a great motivator. And I think that's the thing, is that some people, when they kind of turn away from it, they're like, this is hard. It's like, well, what's your spur? What's spurring you? What's keeping you there? And there has to be something.
Right.
There has to be something that keeps you there. And with some people, it's already kind of wired into the brain.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do it. You have to. You can't, if you don't do it for a couple of weeks or something, you feel like, you got to get back to it. It's almost like an addiction.
Yeah, no, I was telling Lonnie Lynn yesterday, I said, if I go like 3-4 weeks, I start to feel anxious, depressed, something is wrong with me. And it's because, and then I realize I'm not creating. I'm not writing, even if it's 15 minutes a day, because I know that a lot of us have have a job.
It's very hard to do when you have a job. I mean, it really is. It just is hard. And
it's not easy.
And yeah. So all of which is to say, though, in philosophically speaking, so what? It could be worse,
Right,
it
right,
could be a hell of a lot worse. You just need to do it is all, and the whole thing about, I appreciate what you say about, people deserving things, but I don't know that anybody deserves anything. You just, I don't feel like I deserve anything. Uh, I just need to do what I need to do and
well, I mean, I think
hope for the best and
I think you deserve you know kudos for writing and writing so well and being an amazing writer. I mean, even if you don't make money, out of the book sales, at least knowing that readers love what you wrote, what you created, what you spent hours and hours of, building. I mean, come on. I think at least you deserve something like that.
well, I guess it's the word deserve. I'm not. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but it's not a question of, to me, of, I guess, deserving something for it. It just is. Uh, you, you know, I don't have an expectation that I should get anything in return, unless I create something that somebody feels like they can use, and for lack of a better way of putting it. And that's basically what a publisher is going to be doing with you. I'm going to try to get rid of this little thing right here.
Yeah.
Is they want to be able to sell your book, and not that just getting the thing published is the only meaningful end, but otherwise, you're kind of in a little insular box where you're just kind of doing this for yourself.
Right.
That doesn't motivate me.
Right.
That's not my spur. That's
I see. Yeah.
yeah. So so I don't really feel like in the end that anybody owes me anything other than,
Right.
hey, I like this or I don't, or whatever. I'll buy it or I won't, or
Right.
yeah. And I appreciate what you say, and I appreciate anytime that anybody says they liked my books. I mean, I don't mean to downplay that, or but I don't necessarily expect that it will happen, or that somebody who read it will have that response.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of up to me to do what I can do and do the best I can, and
Right.
that's all there is, really.
Right. So what's next for you?
Um,
Your father's memoir, the
well, I
right
have
of
this
his
memoir.
brother.
In fact, I'm actively attempting to get that published. And I spent a long time, a couple of years actually, writing a novel that started off from this thing that I was telling you about this guy who goes back to Antietam, and
Oh, yeah.
I ended up completely changing the thing and setting it in the present day. And one of the reasons I did that is because I wanted to. I was after my fourth Lamb novel was rejected. I thought, okay, it's actually an opportunity for me to do something that I've wanted to do for a while, which is try to write a novel that's set in the present day. And to be honest with you, the present day doesn't interest me at all.
Oh, God. Now with all the stuff.
It's like, what are you going to do? You're gonna, well, I answered the phone and I did a text, and I went out and got ice cream. It's because I find these historical settings much more interesting, and when I read a book, I'm more interested in it. But that's not that's not a good way to think. You need to be able to see it's the same stuff is there: the drama, the compassion, the mistakes, the passion, whatever it is. So I wanted to try to write something that was set in the present day. So I flipped it to the present day, and this person who was a veteran, would have been a veteran of Antietam, who was being haunted by, became a modern person who was there to help an old man ghost write his memoir. And he lives right near the battlefield on this old farm.
Wow.
And so she's a ghost writer, right?
Mhm.
And there's ghosts that begin to haunt her. And I s- I went after that thing for 2 years, and I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. I never felt it was
Right.
the way I wanted it to. And at one point, I had 85,000 word. I had an 85,000 word manuscript, and I decided I just cut it. I just cut it down to what I thought was the essence of the story, and I cut it down to 9,000 words. That's what it is now. And but it's kind of in between. It's not a novel. It's not a novella. It's kind of long for a short story.
Mhm.
So I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. I'm not sure. And but the value in it is just what we were just talking about here about, putting in the time, and even if you're not going to sell it, everything. The value in it, I think, is it did kind of spark some other stuff in my head,
Mhm.
and proved to me that I could write something that was set in the present day. And so that I've gone on to something else now, that I've let that thing kind of just
Sit
sit
for a
there.
little bit.
Do it. And now I'm writing another novel that is I think coming along pretty well. Excuse me, which would also be a ghost story in the sense of,
Mhm.
but not in the sense of necessarily of haunted houses or whatever. It's more
Mhm.
kind of like, well, where are these people? They're stuck somewhere, and maybe they're alive and maybe they're not. I don't,
Yeah.
yeah. So they're kind of stuck in a place that and so that's what I'm trying to do now is to kind of recalibrate and rethink what I'm doing, and follow wherever it leads, and
Right. Right.
try not to get too down on myself about, hey, you're not getting a paycheck here. This ain't working. Because I am very much, grounded in that aspect of it. I guess it comes from being 30 years of newspaper reporter.
Mhm. Mhm.
Deliver or go away.
Right. 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 Right.
It's like,
Right.
yeah, like cut the mustard or not. And so, and plus I'm getting older, and I'm not going to be around forever. And so I feel like, there's a certain amount of time that I have left, and not that the world is waiting with bated breath to find out what I'm going to produce, but I feel like, hey, okay, I gotta keep serious. I gotta stay serious about this, but not let it become
Yeah.
more than it is. It's
Right.
not, it's not more important than other things. It just is what it is. And so I try to, keep a balance in my life, between my family life and this writing thing. And like today, like I take Saturday off basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
usually
try
take
to do
Saturday
something.
off. Otherwise, I write 6 days a week, and I write Sunday mornings usually, and then I write throughout the day through the week. And
Right.
but I take Saturday off because I feel like,
You need a break.
well, and you can't be too much of a, you gotta turn your attention away, at some
Right.
point back to something else other than your own muse. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Uh, so, um, so that's why I do that.
Yeah. So one last question. What kind of tip would you give to a newbie writer about, from your perspective, the writing career?
Uh, my tip would be kind of a threefold thing. Number one, try to write every day. I know it's hard, and it is hard. It's
Mhm.
very hard,
Yeah.
but try to carve that time out, and figure out what's your best time. Is it at night? Is it early in the morning,
Right.
but try to carve it out, even if it's only an hour or 90 minutes, and go and do it. Try to do it every day. Try not to get discouraged. You will get discouraged. You're going to get rejected. You're going to get discouraged. Remember that that's a state of mind, as opposed to, it's all about a state of mind.
Yeah, that's true.
So try not to be discouraged and keep coming back. And then last but not least, again, this is very, very, very hard, but try not to take to heart too much what other people tell you about your writing. Because there are lots of people out there that are going to tell you, I don't know. And at some point you really have to harden yourself to that and say, and not that you want to push aside all criticism, but there are people in your life who you respect, and that they know what they're talking about, and you can sit down with them and they can critique your work, and it's a worthwhile, useful critique.
Right. It's acceptable. Mm-hmm.
But you get a lot of stuff that's not, and everybody's an expert, as it were, and
yeah, you
have to try to tune that out, and it's very difficult. I mean, that's the thing, is that a lot of this is very difficult, especially if you don't have, if you've never been published, and you know what this, how difficult it is to get published. It can be very discouraging, but that's the advice, is you have to try to put that discouragement aside. And I don't know what to tell you how to do that.
Right.
And in fact, when people ask me about, what do I mean? What do people mean when they say writing talent, or what is writing talent, or whatever? And I don't think it's necessarily the ability to write lovely prose as much as it is just to stick it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just stick with it, stick it out, and keep trusting that there's something in there that you have to say.
Right.
It's eventually gonna strike a chord with you, and then it's gonna hopefully strike a chord with readers.
Right.
But in the meantime, you really have to tune out all that other stuff.
Yeah, awesome tips.
Stephen Spender had a great, the poet Stephen Spender had a great quote about critics and criticism, which I could read to you if I could pop it up, or I can just send it to you.
No, go ahead, read it.
This is Stephen Spender, who was a British poet, and he was writing about reviews and book reviews, and he said, quote, "The reviews which a writer receives are less his business than anyone else's. They are a kind of conversation which goes on behind his back. Reviewers do not address themselves to writers, but to readers. To overhear conversations behind his back is more disconcerting than useful to a writer." Wow. You should remember that the tendency of reviewers is to criticize work not for what it is, but for what it fails to be. And it is not necessarily true that he should remember this by trying to become other than he is. And so that, in a nutshell, is, I guess, my bon mot for the youngsters out there.
That's an awesome saying. I think I'm going to look for it and
yeah, I can send it to you in an email.
Yes,
if you
please.
want.
Yeah, if you can, that would be great.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much, because I know you're terribly busy.
I'm not terribly busy. I really appreciate you letting me know about this and allowing me to be part of this.
Thank you for visiting A Writer's Perspective. I hope you enjoyed our visit with Stephen Kelly. For more on Stephen, please check out the description box below for links to his website and books. In the meantime, keep on reading and writing.